Okay, so we're here in the next step of following the tutorial, and we are going to be displaying the data in a list. We already have the card UI working, so now the goal is to put this UI, why did we go there, into a list. So let's start and let's try to remember that, kind of pretending to not know what's happening. So let's go. So list is the container view that displays rows of data arranged in a single scrollable column. In this tutorial, you will use a list view to display a summary of each of the user daily scrums. Then you will make the list the main screen of the app. First of all, I think that list makes more sense as the name of this view. I think that SwiftUI made a good choice that they decided to change this, which we are used to from people that knows UIKit, who are used to call this a table view, which is always felt kind of weird because it's not really, when you think about a table, you think, at least the majority of people think about a two-dimensional thing. And a list is mostly a one-dimensional thing. So it makes more sense to call it this way. Even though, as we will see explored in the future, you have other views that allow you to do two-dimensional thing or more complex stuff. So download the starter project and follow along with this tutorial, or open the finished project and explore on your own. So as I said in the previous parts, they really want you to start from the starter project because there are things that have happened between one step of the tutorial, one chapter, and the other one. But I don't think that's good. So I'm just going to continue with the project that we already started. And if we see that there are things missing, hopefully I realize and I don't waste too much time. Okay. So section 1, display a list of daily scrums. You can populate a list with a static or dynamic views. Cool. In this section, you will use a SwiftUI for each view structure to dynamically generate rows from an array of daily scrum objects. Okay. You will use the card view that you built in the previous tutorial to construct each row. So we have here basically what we need to write. Okay. So step 1, create a SwiftUI view named Scrums view. Okay. So we start seeing how the way that Apple names files, it's always basically suffixing them with the view suffix because they are a SwiftUI view. It's not always mandatory and not always preferable, especially since I think one of the things that people doesn't use a lot in Swift, it's basically putting different things on the same file, different types, different entities on the same file. And I think it's really advantageous to do that, especially in SwiftUI, and especially if you follow things like the composer architecture, which allows you to super easily, and honestly, it's more comfortable for some people, especially me, to put different things that are related into the same file. Makes a lot of sense to me. Like, you have the structure in your head much easily than having to jump between different unrelated files. But that's not for everybody. So for now, let's just follow what Apple says. Again, we're following this tutorial, pretending that we don't know much about it. So we have this Scrums view. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate what view it's supposed to be for one item and which view it's supposed to be for a list. We put the plural here, so we're supposed to say that. But when you're reading it, without paying much attention, sometimes it's not that easy. Anyway, let's go to the step 2. So we add a constant property named Scrums of the type daily scrum. Okay. So let's do that. Daily scrum. So we have this here, and of course, every time you change the data, the data from a view, the preview is stopped. In this case, more importantly, because you actually need to pass something here. And in this case, add Scrum as a property because it's compared to error, because Scrum view needs to be initialized with an array. Cool, we'll fix this in the next step. That's fine that they explain it. And here what we want is to use the type with a static property that gives you the data. And now we can continue with this. And I like to force kind of the preview to be live, because it makes it easier now to start modifying things and seeing the preview directly, instead of writing everything and then kicking out the preview. Sometimes it stops again, but whatever. Replace the text with a list. Okay, so I replace this with a list. And now what is a list? The list initializer in this step accepts a view builder as its only parameter. The heck is a view builder? Whatever. So you can add rows with the same syntax you have been using with other container views, such as hstack and vstack. To be honest, this is kind of like, what the hell is a view builder? Like, I don't expect people that's doing this tutorial with basic knowledge of Swift, which is pretty much what you need to make one of these applications, to actually know what a view builder is. It's kind of weird that they specify the things. But anyway, you can initialize lists from collections of data, specify different selection types and more. To learn more about lists, view the Apple developer documentation. And if we click this link, we're actually going into the Apple documentation of list, which, as you can see, it's not very useful, honestly. I don't know why they point you to this when the documentation is super useless. You have a lot of initializers here, but they are not easy to read, you know. You're much better just trying to autocomplete and see what it's there. So yeah, I don't think this link is very useful at all. Anyway. Next, you will populate the list using a for each view. To create views using the for each, you will pass its initializer a collection of items along with a closure that creates a view for each item. That's cool. See, for example, it's interesting that they use the for each inside instead of using the initializer. But yeah. Add the for each view, pass the Scrums array and key path to the title property to the initializer. Okay. So you can do the for each. And now you're asking me to do this here. So we pass the Scrums, we pass a key path for the title, so we are uniquifying on the title, and I'm gonna call it Scrum, and that's it for now. Okay, for each needs a way to identify individual items in the collection. For now, because all of the Scrums in the test data have different names, you can use the title property for each item. The next session we'll learn how to provide a stable notion of identity to the Scrum. That's nice. Now we basically need to define what each row, how to render each row. So we can use the card view that we did the other day and pass the Scrum data model here. This is compiling, so now we see this. Perfect. Why is it only showing one though? Didn't we add? Yeah, we have three. We have three, and I'm seeing three. It's not rendering them. Why? Recall that the color of the text in the card view is either black or white depending on the Scrum color. Only one item appears in the list because the color of the second and third Scrums produce white text. And until you specify a different color, the background of the card view is white itself. Exactly. And now you're gonna make list row background to the Scrum color. Okay. So that's probably why they didn't want us to put the color in the card view itself, because they want you to specify it with a list row background, which, as you can see here, it puts a custom background on the list, which is different than having this a background color. Because if I'm not mistaken, what this means is that when you select, well, now you cannot select it, but if you're able to select, it's gonna do the highlighted styles and all that stuff automatically. So as I said on the previous part of the tutorial, at that point it felt weird that we added the background color on the preview itself, and that was problematic in some sense instead of adding it just here. But of course now we see that it was a good advice, because now you use this list modifier, that it's much more correct than not just doing it with just a background in the view itself. So that was section 1. Cool. Now, make Scrums identifiable. Okay, so for now we have seen how to just put something on a list without much difficulty. But they have mentioned that we are using this title, which is not really correct, because yes, for now we're using basic data, and the title is different on each of these items. But of course, real world, that's not going to be the case, so we need to make the Scrum object properly identifiable. So for each structure, generate dynamic views by iterating over identifiable data. In the previous section, use the key path to identify Scrums by their titles. This approach worked for prototyping, but it's not going to work because sample data, that's basically what I said. The work with user-generated content, you will make daily Scrum conform to identifiable protocol for a more robust way to communicate identity. The protocol has one recommend, which is providing an ID, which needs to be a stable identifier for the entity. And that's very important. So I'm not sure if they're going to explain what a stable identifier is, or I don't know what kind of things you should take into account when making identifiable property. But let's see what they explain. So go to the daily Scrum and declare conformance to identifiable. That should be easy. Daily Scrum, and we make it identifiable. To conform, you need to make a property ID. Your code won't compile until you add this property. Okay. Add a constant name ID of type UUID. So we add a constant, and it's important that it's a constant because it makes sure that it can never be modified no matter what. Now your code still doesn't compile, of course, because you need to update the identifier, the initializers, and I'm just gonna take this. Yeah, I'm just gonna take this because honestly, like, we can generate it with Xcode, but this is using a default value, so you don't have to change this. Perfect. Your code will compile. Now we can go to the for each and remove the ID, because now the for each already knows how to properly identify each item in the list. And everything is working as before. Perfect. So now you will make the Scrums view the app's root view. Okay. You create a SwiftUI app by declaring a structure that conforms to the app protocol, as we can see here. The app's body property returns a scene that contains a view hierarchy representing the primary use interface of the app. Cool. So we open this, which until now yeah. So we open this, which we don't touch until now, and instead of making the meeting view, we make it the Scrums view, and this is gonna of course ask for the data, which for now we just pass the mock data that we have, and we have a window grab. So it explains here the window grab is one of the primitive scenes that SwiftUI provides. On iOS, the views scene builder represented in a window that fills the device of the entire screen. Cool. And now we can build and run and verify that everything works as expected on the simulator, not only on the preview. And here we have it, our start of the application running on the simulator. We see the three rows that come from the test data that we added, and the colors and everything working as expected. So you have accomplished quite a bit so far. You designed the Scrum 2 main screens and set the app root view. In the next chapter, you will make the app more interactive by giving users the ability to navigate between the views, which is super interesting and important. But before that, let's check our understanding. How should you use for each to display the title of each training session in a text view? So a training session has a session number and a title. So for each sessions, that's not correct because we're missing a way to identify the sessions. Since the sessions, it's not conforming to identifiable. This is not correct because you are passing here what a static doesn't make any sense, because this is kind of saying the static property on the training session, but training session doesn't have a static property. So what you're looking for is to use the key path to the property. Perfect. That was a good question. Why does for each in content view fail to compile? The for each in the content view fails to compile. We have an array of items, and an item is identifiable for each item. In item, well, yeah, because this is not SwiftUI. Well, it is now, right? Yeah. Yeah, so this syntax is fine, but the return should return a view. You cannot return nothing. The ID no, because it's identifiable, so that's fine. And summary isn't a valid view, it's a valid view. So it's because you should return a view. In this case, you can return an empty view, by the way. But anyway, which code snippet specifies a text view as the main screen of the app? Well, this one, it's an app, text, main screen, fine. There is a view, and this is an app with a window group. I think it's this one. You always need to put a window group, right? Yep, cool. So that's it for this basically chapter. The next chapter, we're gonna be creating a navigation hierarchy.